Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Welcome back to another episode of DC Movie News Character Corner. This week, we're talking about one of my favorite DC characters, The Question. Originally, he was created in 1967 by Steve Ditko. He appeared in another character's comic, it was Blue Beetle, his #1, but it was also at the time called Charleston Comics. Essentially, the history of is he's a reporter that was kind of worked in Hub City. And he was investigating corruption, he got hurt, and he ended up in the residence of a Dr. Aristotle Roder, who was kind of a scientist, medic kind of guy. And of course, back in the 60s, the origins were kind of loose in how they did. He was working on a substance called pseudoderm, which was used, meant to be created for burn victims. It was like a fake skin that could be used to create new skin on burn victims. Well, he somehow gave it to Vic, and he used it to form a mask on his face. He put it over his face, and then in his belt buckle, he had 2 different nozzles and released a colorless, odorless gas that would envelope his body, and they kind of did it in the comics. It kind of swirled around in the shape of a question mark, and it sealed the skin to his face, but you couldn't make out his features. It was just a blank face, and it also turned his clothes a different color. So it's kind of the way they used the secret identity. And he fought corruption in Hub City for years, and that was kind of just the basis of the character. But he was kind of just an everyday guy, reporter that was against the mob. So he was kind of a street level character. As he was kind of went through the comics, 70s wasn't really much then, but it was in the 80s when Denny O'Neil took over. And that's when I really got into the character, where they kind of gave him a hard edge. They did away with the fedora and suit that he would wear. He kind of just had a trench coat or a leather jacket. The origin was still there, but this is when they started shifting in. They brought Lady Shiva in, and she took him to Richard Dragon, who is, if you know DC Comics, he's kind of like the Mr. Miyagi, Bruce Lee of DC Comics. If anyone's a martial artist, they've trained with Richard Dragon. So he trained with Lady Shiva, Richard Dragon, to become a really good hand-to-hand combatant. On level, not really with Batman that level, but can hold his own. So then that's kind of been the way that he went. And it wasn't until he was introduced in the Justice League Unlimited in the early 2000s where they did a whole different spin on him. He was still a reporter, but he kind of became this wacky conspiracy theorist. He would have in his apartment, he had the wall with all the different pictures on it with the different dots and the pins connecting all these theories. Kind of a little bit of a wacko. The Justice League kind of looked at him as the loose cannon. So that was a completely different take, voiced by Jeffrey Combs, if you know that actor, had such a cool voice on that show. The reason I want to talk to him, because there was kind of a murmuring happening on Twitter this week that they thought this character was appearing on Arrow. Now, I've been watching Arrow, didn't know about this, but when Roy came back, he mentioned that he was laying low in Hub City. So that was kind of the big red flag that the talk is that the Question might show up. Now, from the beginning of Arrow, I've always thought that this character would be great on that show. He's kind of a street level martial artist, reporter guy. Simple special effects with the mask, can be done with prosthetics, would be a great fit on Arrow. And I'm kind of hearing rumors that they're kind of going to go with Constantine, where they're going to give him a little bit of a spiritual aspect to him to fight Damien Dark. And this kind of comes from, in the early 2000s, a writer named Veach, I believe his name was, took a spin on the Question where he was kind of a shaman. He would speak to the city and let the city kind of like, through mystic things, he could kind of get a feel for what was going on in the city. So that might be what they're pulling from. I don't know. Take that as rumor, guys. But the Question, such a good character. If you want to find out more about him, check out Denny O'Neil's run from the 80s, the Veach run in 2000, the Justice League animated series. But also, you might not know this, the Question is the influence for Rorschach and Watchmen. I said Charleston Comics at the beginning of this. Alan Moore, when he wanted to tell that story, wanted to use those characters, Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, The Question, and tell that story. But if you know Watchmen, you know how dark it is. And it kind of messes with what superheroes are. So DC said, no, you're not going to use those characters. So he just created his own. So The Question became Rorschach. Blue Beetle became the Owl. Captain Atom became Dr. Manhattan. So you kind of see where that went. So there's so much on The Question. Hit me up on Twitter at Mike Kalinowski if you want to find out more about him. We'll see you next week.